The war was over, but the ringing in my ears wasn't. I left that blue coat on a peg, hoping the ghosts of the Union wouldn't follow me across the Mississippi. We chased the sunset. My wife, Sarah, looked at the horizon like it was a promise. I looked at it like a challenge. $18. That's what a new life cost in 1865. A handful of crumpled bills for a piece of the American dream. Dickinson County. I drove that stake into the ground and felt like a king. 160 acres of nothing, and it was all mine. The government gave us the land, but the prairie didn't want us there. We broke our backs just to break the sod. There's no timber for miles. So, you build with what you have, the very earth beneath your boots. Grass, mud, and sweat. We called it a house. The sky called it a target. It was a brown scar on a green sea, waiting to melt back into the mud. Hunger is a fine seasoning until a bull snake drops from the ceiling into your salt pork. That's when you realize you're living in a burrow, not a home. Sarah fought the dust every hour. But the Kansas wind is a persistent thief. It steals your cleanliness, then it steals your spirit. When the clouds opened up, the roof didn't just leak, it dissolved. We sat there in the dark, shivering in a room made of melting tears. 2 years of misery finally paid off. That wheat looked like solid gold under the August sun. We thought we'd turned the corner. $100 profit. After seeds, tools, and debt, that's all that was left of 2 years of my life. It was enough to buy hope, but not much else. Abilene was growing up, but it was growing up wild. Cattle, whiskey, and men with too much adrenaline and not enough sense. We built a community. For the first time, people looked at me and didn't see a soldier or a dirt farmer. They saw a neighbor. I never liked violence. I'd seen enough in the war to last 10 lifetimes. I found that a steady gaze often did more work than a steady trigger finger. They came to my porch with shadows as long as their troubles. The town was breaking, and they needed a pillar to hold it up. The marshal held out that star. It was heavy. Sarah's eyes told me to stay on the farm, but my heart told me I couldn't walk away. I stood on crates and talked about peace. I wasn't a politician. I was just a man who wanted a town where a woman could walk to church without hearing a gunshot. The old sheriff didn't like the competition. He smelled of rot and rye, trying to buy votes with the very chaos I was trying to stop. The people spoke. It wasn't even close. They wanted a man who hadn't been bought. They got me. That badge felt cold against my chest. A shiny target for every bored gunslinger looking to make a name for himself. I gave Sarah the wooden house she dreamed of, but she spent every night staring at the door, waiting for it to swing open with bad news. The night shifts were the loneliest. Just me, the moon, and the muffled roar of the saloons where trouble was brewing like a storm. It happened in an alleyway. No words, just the sudden, metallic clack of a hammer being pulled back. My training took over. The first man I killed as sheriff. He was barely 20. I stared at the smoke rising from my barrel and felt the war coming back to me. I went home with blood on my cuffs. Sarah didn't ask. She just looked at me like I was becoming a stranger. My deputy was a good kid, full of fire and the belief that the law was a shield. I tried to tell him it was more like a lightning rod. We rode out on a Tuesday. Routine business. A piece of paper to tell a man he didn't own his dirt anymore. The farm was silent. No chickens, no dogs. Just the sound of the wind through the dead corn stalks. I called out to old Thomas. I wanted to help him, to find a way. But the frontier doesn't leave much room for finding a way. Part 4. The tragedy. The first shot cracked the air like a whip. Logic goes out the window when the lead starts flying. We were pinned. Every time I breathed, a bullet bit into the stone well. It wasn't a legal proceeding anymore. It was a kill zone. I saw Thomas. He looked like a man who had already lost everything and was just waiting for the final bill to come due. I saw movement. A shadow. A gun barrel. I didn't think. I just squeezed the trigger. I was the law, and the law had to survive. The world went silent. My deputy didn't scream. He just sighed. I had put a hole in the only man in this county I truly trusted. I held him as his life leaked into the Kansas dirt. I begged God to take me instead, but God wasn't listening that day. Thomas rose up one last time. I didn't see a man anymore. I saw the reason my friend was dead. I finished it. I finished everything. The ride back felt like a funeral procession for my soul. 2 bodies. 1 mistake. 0 excuses. In the West, Hero to villain is a one-step trip. The town didn't see a peacemaker anymore. They saw a man who brought death home with him. I took the badge off. It was just a piece of tin. It didn't stop bullets, and it certainly didn't stop the guilt. Then the sickness came. Sarah's cough sounded like the rattling of dry leaves. Tuberculosis, the one outlaw I couldn't shoot. I spent my last dollars on tinctures and hope. But the bottle in my other hand was the only thing that made the nights bearable. The rain didn't wash anything away. It just turned the cemetery into a bog. I buried my heart in that Dickinson County soil. I left the badge in the gutter. Let the next fool try to carry the weight of this town. I was done. Time became a blur of cheap whiskey and bad hands. I was a ghost haunting my own life, sitting in the very saloons I used to police. A card game. A young man with a smirk and an ace up his sleeve. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to feel alive enough to be angry. He was faster than I used to be. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years enforcing the law, only to die over a hand of cards. The floorboards were cold. Strange, I always thought I'd die in a field or a trench, not under a table in a room that smelled of stale beer. They shouted my name. Sheriff, they called me. Funny how they remembered the title only when I was too far gone to use it. The wind still blows across the 160 acres. The soddy is gone. The badge is rust. But for a moment, I stood for something. And that has to be enough.